Well, our guest here this morning comes to us from Eagle, Wisconsin. Ken Imhoff and his supportive wife Eileen have been married for 24 years. I love that. He gave this to me. His supportive wife, Eileen. And I drew from that anyone who allows a guy to build a car in their basement for 17 years, supportive probably fits, I would think. They live in Eagle, Wisconsin. They have two wonderful daughters, Kennedy, who's 15, and Morgan, 11. Kennedy made the trip with Ken, not here yet this morning, but Morgan, who's 11, did not because she has perfect attendance at her school and wanted to keep that intact. Ken is an engineer by trade and has been in manufacturing since high school, while his wife is a stay-at-home mom with their brand new 120-pound Newfoundland puppy. Ken's hobbies are building cars, currently a 1953 Studebaker, motorcycles, and more cars. How about a big Ada Bible Church welcome for Ken Imhoff? Ken, come on up.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, as we put this together, we kind of thought that maybe the best way to do this is just to kind of pretend like we were just in a coffee shop and just kind of having a conversation with 400 or so of our closest friends kind of listening in. So that's kind of how we're going to progress here this morning. And again, by the way, a reminder, after we're done, Ken's going to head out to the car, and he'll be there absolutely as long this morning as you guys want to kind of hang out and talk, any questions you might have for him at that point. So Ken, kind of to get us started, to set the stage, tell us a little bit about your childhood and how, if at all, that kind of led to a project like building this car.
Okay, well, I want to say I didn't really have a normal childhood. I had a father who was a German perfectionist, and I'm a recovering perfectionist to start off with. He was military, and he had the philosophy that if you could make it with your hands instead of buying it, that would be the route to go. I mean, my dad was raised during the Depression, so I think that philosophy of being resourceful came from that. Okay. And we were, I'm not going to say poor, but my dad went to work. My mom was a stay-home mom pretty much all our childhood. I have two sisters. I was an only son. And my dad wanted to pass on all those resources to his son, working with your hands. When I had a need for a bike when I was a kid, we didn't rush out to the store and buy a bike. We made one. Neighbor girl was outgrowing her 20-inch Schwinn, and they donated it to our family, and my dad said, "There's your bike." And I said, "It's a girl's bike." My dad goes, "Yeah, we can do some things." So he handed me a hacksaw, and we sawed that bottom bar off, flipped it upside down, and he got the arc welder out, and we arc welded that tube, and he handed me a rat tail file, and he says, "No, file it nice and smooth."
There you go.
And then he would put his hand over it and say, "You missed a spot here." Like I said, he was a perfectionist, so he was already coaching me at a young age.
Okay, how did that translate into then automobiles, moving from bikes to, say, building a car?
Sure. Well, a step back, my dad was an ex-dirt track racer. So cars were in my family all the time. I mean, when I was a little kid, I was going to the pits with my dad. I was actually too young to be in the pits, but they always let me bring, because my dad was part of the crew. So I got to be around that all my life. He was USAC racing. My dad drove for a while, but then went into the pit crew because he didn't have what it takes to continue pushing the metal when you got to go and fix it too. So my dad put a driver in the seat, and he was back to the mechanic portion of it. And my dad built his own car when he was in Air Force in Europe. He was stationed in England in the Air Force, and he built a scratch-built, kind of like a Cobra. If you guys know what Cobra AC Cobras are, this was the D-model Jaguar, which in England would have been like the Cobra is here. It had a little four-cylinder engine, a space tube frame, a fiberglass body that he laid up himself. That was 1957, 58. So it was kind of like cutting edge at the time.
So from this, then, you saw him or heard about what he had done, and then kind of just picked it up and then moved forward with it.
Well, the goal was, my dad never really finished his car. Okay, he got it to a point, but how family can change your plans and all that. And went out of the military and moved back to the States here. And the car came with us, but it got lost.
So
It
not
just got
finished.
lost.
Not finished means what did it
No
look like when he
paint.
finally
Yeah,
said?
no paint or interior, that kind of stuff
Okay.
to finish it really up. And family got in the way. When
Okay.
he moved back to the States, things changed.
Okay.
And the car was never finished. And my dad would start another project, and something would happen, family and running out of funds.
Okay.
Okay. It fueled me that I wanted to do something like my father did. I want him to be proud of me as a man. I looked up to my father. I wanted to please him. I wanted to be a son that he could be proud of.
Sure.
That's where the idea of building my own car came from.
Okay, let's set that aside just for a second. Let's move the calendar ahead a few years. Talk to us about how you met your wife and the unique role that she played in the development of the Lamborghini.
Right. You touched on it. The word supportive probably isn't the right word. It's more than supportive. I don't know if they'd make a word that would fit my wife. I met her when she was 19. I was 29. I was a lot older. Not proud of it, but I met her in a bar. It's dance hall. Let's put it that way. It wasn't really a bar, dance hall. And yeah, I'm 56 years old, so things were different back then.
No, really, probably not, actually.
She's the love of my life. She was gorgeous. I saw her, and I was immediately attracted to her. She's tall and dark brown hair, green eyes, and I asked her to dance, and things led to another, and we started dating each other for a while. And I noticed right off there was two things that I liked about her. She was from a Christian family. Her mom and her father had passed away already. Her mom was part of the Catholic Church and give communion to shut-ins. Okay. And I thought, you know what? That's going to come in handy for me someday. I didn't realize how that was going to play out, but I thought that I was attracted to that. And the other thing was that Eileen was very, very easygoing. In other words, I could probably say, hey, I got this car part I need to buy. What do you think? We're okay with wieners and macaroni for a week, and I could have this car part. And my wife would go, yeah, sure. So I kind of knew, and I tested that, and I'll go into that if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah.
2 months into our dating, I had this idea of building this Lamborghini, and I'll get to why we chose
And
a Lamborghini.
what year is this now?
This would be 1989.
Okay.
Hemmings Motor News. You car guys here know Hemmings Motor News was the place to look for car parts.
Sure. Yeah.
It's pre-internet, pre-eBay. And I saw in Hemmings Motor News somebody had a ZF 5-speed transmission out of the Pantera. Well, I knew that was the core to building a mid-engine car. I wanted to build a mid-engine car. And it was $2,400. It was out of California. I had $400. Now, this is 2 months into I'm dating my future wife. I said, could you borrow me $2,000 for this transmission? Yeah. This is the truth. I'm not exaggerating. Yeah, yeah. He gets it. She said, that's all I have. Don't tell my mom, but I'll write you a check, but you have to pay me back. And I had all intentions of paying her back. Well, we bought that transmission, and I kept it under my apartment sink as a visual reminder of our commitment together. She was on board with this commitment about building this car when we had a house and a garage.
Did her mom ever find out?
No. She never found out. No, I paid her back at tax return time. I paid her back, and all was good.
And how long did the transmission stay under the sink?
Probably for a year. I moved out of my apartment, and we got married and bought a house in Eagle, Wisconsin, which I live, as you said, I live now. And that transmission was the starting block.
Okay.
That's what I needed to get going.
Now,
I built a car around that, really.
Now, let's talk about the house, because as I understand it, the house was specifically chosen for this project. Maybe?
It had a garage. That was my requirement. If I was going to build this car, thinking back to how my dad struggled, we lived in apartments, and my dad was trying to work on cars in a borrowed garage from a neighbor or whatever, and then they finally moved to Butler where he had his own garage, but money always ran out. It was always a money issue. So I bought the house because it had a garage, and I never thought about building it in the basement. And we can go into that if you'd like to understand how that came about.
Well, we'll get to that. Let's talk
Okay.
about, first of all, the decision to build that particular car, the Lamborghini Countach.
Okay.
Why that car?
I knew it wanted or needed to be a mid-engine car. I've always fascinated with exotics, and mid-engine cars are the way to go. I blame it on Burt Reynolds. Anybody know who Burt Reynolds is? Cannonball Run? Yeah.
The old guys, they know.
Yeah, they know who Burt Reynolds is. Cannonball Run. I saw the movie. It's a corny video, but I saw it, but I had no idea what the opening scene was with this black car. It's a Lamborghini Countach. I couldn't even pronounce it. Lamborghini. I don't even know anything about this car. I know Porsches, I know Ferraris, I know Maseratis. What is this? And I was on this search to find out what a Lamborghini was all about. And I was just hell-bent on finding out what it was. And I fell in love with it. But I wanted to put my heritage, which is American V8, in it. So it was a natural. You got a Pantera transmission with a 351 Cleveland from a Pantera, skinned in aluminum Lamborghini.
Okay, you mentioned that you bought the house because of the garage.
Right.
But you didn't build the car in the garage, you built it in the basement.
Correct.
Why?
Yeah, that's most people don't get that part.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but anyway.
All right. I touched on it a little bit. My dad struggled with building his projects, his cars. Never could afford to heat the garage. We always kept our family's cars out in the driveway while my dad consumed the garage. And I wanted to knock down all those roadblocks that would keep me from finishing the car. And heating a garage and putting our transportation cars out in the driveway, just this never really works. I remember my dad shoveling the snow off the cars. Living in Wisconsin, you guys are in Michigan, you know what I'm talking about. I had a neighbor who ran a small store, and he ran an excavation business out of the small deli grocery store. He sat in a chair just like this at the front door.
So it's a deli, grocery store, and excavating.
Yes.
I can see how those work together.
Yep. His wife ran the deli, he ran the construction business. And he sat in a chair at the door and greeted everybody and worked on a little counter and a phone.
Those sandwiches had to be huge.
The guy, anyway, he was the most friendliest man I've ever seen in my life. And he welcomed us the first day we walked in the store. He goes, I don't know you guys. I said, well, we lived right over here in Eagle Springs. He goes, what do you do, And I said, Jerry, I want to build this car. I'm thinking about building it in the basement. He goes, well, that don't sound like a crazy idea. He jumped in his vehicle and said, let's go over and look at your basement. So pull up in front of my house, walk in the kitchen. My wife goes, what's Jerry doing here? I'm like, don't mind. He wants to see something in the basement. So we walk down the basement. He's looking around. He's like, okay, there's your septic system, and there's where your well comes in. He goes, at the front of the house? I said, yeah. He goes, you could tear out that basement wall right there. We could excavate a ramp out of your basement. A couple hours, we're done.
No problem.
Hey, and I said, you sure this is not a crazy idea? He goes, no, I think it's fine. I had heat. I had a hydronic heat, which ran around the perimeter of the basement. It was heated. I had lights. It was an unfinished basement, concrete floor, block walls. It was perfect. I could go down there. One of the excuses was, well, I don't want to go out in the garage. Supper's going to be pretty soon. No, I could run down the basement. My wife would flitch on the light. Yep, supper's ready. I would come upstairs and go back downstairs, and it was perfect.
There you go. So you decide you're going to build it. How do you start to do a project like this?
Yeah, I had to teach myself a lot of skills that my dad hadn't passed on. One was an English wheel. That was the key component to rolling aluminum panels.
How does it work?
It's kind of hard to explain, but I use the analogy Christmas presents, ribbon, and pulling the scissors on a ribbon. What happens when you pull that scissors on a ribbon? You're actually stressing the one side of the ribbon, and it curls up. It's the same principle. You're pinching the aluminum down with a flat wheel on one side and a curved wheel on the other. The aluminum actually displaces and actually starts to gently curve. And as you spin it around, you can put a compound curve in a panel. You can also overwork it, and it's already too far bent, and now it goes in a corner in a pile, and you start another piece.
Okay.
And I had more over there than I had on the car.
So, how do you know what size to make all of these pieces? You're making it by hand in your
Right.
basement. How do you know how big these pieces have to be?
I'll go back to where I got to measure a real car. I had the opportunity to go to a dealership in Wisconsin. They had a Countach on the dealership floor. And a friend of mine said, I heard you're building a Lamborghini. And I said, yeah. And he says, you want to see a real one? I haven't seen a real one yet. I've seen pictures, but I've never seen a real one. And I'm going to build one. He said, they go to lunch at noon. Bring a cloth tape measure and all the dimensions that you want. I'll hold the dummy in, and we'll measure the whole car while they're at lunch. You'll never know, they'll be the wiser of it. And I said, hey, this sounds
You had
pretty.
to get it done while they were gone because
Correct.
they wouldn't let you measure it.
We had 1 hour.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I don't think they'd let us crawl all over that Lamborghini like that. So I show up at the dealership, and I'm like, my friend's not here. Now, my wife had told me, yeah, this guy kind of BS's a little bit. I'm thinking, he's not going to show up. But I'm standing here waiting for him, and there he comes through the door. And sure enough, an hour later, we had, I think, 165 dimensions. I laid awake at night. Did I forget? I'll never get the opportunity again. Did I forget something, you know, a measurement from a headlight to where the windshield starts or a door opening or whatever it was? And I used that in conjunction with 52 posters of the car all around my basement wall and a lot of this. Well, I'm a pretty good artist, so I have a look at something, yeah, that looks pretty right. And I used my wife as an example to come down the basement. Does that look right to you? And she goes, I think it's a little crooked. Yeah, I thought so too. Start over.
So how do you fashion the body then? You've got to have some way to know that all of these pieces are going to fit together. How do you do that?
Right. I built a wooden scale buck. That's what most guys that work in aluminum bodybuilding use, a wooden scale buck. It looks like an aircraft frame. And you put panel by panel by panel. I literally had the body assembled on this wooden buck before it ever came off to go to the steel frame. Now, I designed a steel frame to support that aluminum body at the points that it needed to. And it's kind of hidden in the car, but you can see it.
Okay.
It's bolted right to the frame. It's rigid.
Okay. Did you ever think it would take 17 years to complete the car?
No. If I would have known I'm taking 17 years, I probably wouldn't have started it.
When you started, how long did you think it would take to get it done?
5.
So what happened?
What happened? Well, like I said, with my father, life gets in the way. I didn't have any conception on how long it takes to make each individual piece. I also had issues with losing interest. As I'm sure some of the car guys here might know, you can lose interest in a project when it becomes overwhelming. And I would find diversions. I'd buy a motorcycle that needs restoration. I'd buy a boat that needs restoration. Things that would happen in a couple of months versus years. And I would get distracted, and I wouldn't touch the car for a year or two. So that's why I got pushed out so long.
What led to you ultimately finishing it after all those years?
My 50th birthday. I had put goals to achieve, and I kept missing them. And I would beat myself up, and I'd come up with excuses. Well, I don't have any money. Well, that was a good one because I used to figure out ways to finance things. I told you about the macaroni and hot dogs. I did that quite often. So much so that I'm going to get into the challenges part. Well, I won't go there just right now.
Okay. Well, let's bring your daughter into the story at this point because she is a significant part of what happened. Explain that to us.
That's my daughter right there.
There's Kennedy right down there. Welcome. Hey, Kennedy.
Back in 2010, my daughter came down with a rare disease called Guillain-Barré. It's a autoimmune disease, and basically your body attacks its own nervous system, and she ended up within a matter of days paralyzed from the waist down. And the car's already finished at this time, and I'm basking in the whole idea, what am I going to do with this car? And God brings us into our family. And I didn't know that at the time, obviously, but she was in the hospital, and I'm sitting there with my wife for 40 hours. We don't know what's wrong with her. and the doctors are putting her in the MRI machine and brain scans and everything, and it was so surreal for 48 hours. I didn't know if we were going to lose her or not, because they were actually getting pretty panicky because it started working its way inward. It goes from the extremities first and works to the major organs, and it can take your life. And it was so aggressive. Time was of essence here. There was a small chapel at Children's Hospital, and I walked by, and something, I don't know exactly what it was, drew me to this chapel. And I knew what that was. I need to pray. And I walked into that chapel, and I saw a little prayer book there, and I said, this would be a good place. I'm not good with words. I'll write it. I said, Dear God, if you can have my daughter walk out of here on her own power, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. And I knew what that meant. And 10 days later, my daughter walked out of Children's Hospital on her own with the help of a walker out of that hospital, and my life has never been the same since.
So you said you knew what it meant when you prayed that prayer. What did it mean?
It meant to me that I was going to have to change. The way I was living my life, vicariously through worldly treasures, my cars, my boats, my stuff that I thought was making me happy, was meaningless at that point. I instantly lost interest in all those things. And I found an inner happiness that I've never felt before.
How did God use that situation then to bring you to himself at that point?
I started opening the Bible. I was baptized. I asked for forgiveness of my sins first. I was in church with my wife. We started going back to church. We had been gone for quite a long time. And I asked the Lord, on my hands and knees, all the things that I've done in the past, I'm so sorry for. Could you please forgive me? And I broke down. I mean, and my kids looked at me and said, what's wrong with Daddy? And she even had a look on her face. And I said, I've just been forgiven. And I want to change my life. And I apologize to my wife, all the things I've done, over the years. And, she left me for 6 months over this car. I mean, I was spending so much money, so much time that she felt second to the car. And I realized how much I'd hurt her. She took Kennedy when she was 3 years old and left me for 6 months. And you think that would make me change? No, I was too stubborn. I was too proud.
But this situation did.
This situation did is, I believe God knew how to get to me. My wife leaving wasn't enough. It was through my child.
So what happened then in relationship to the car and all of the other stuff that you'd accumulated through the years?
As soon as I was baptized and had completely changed, I overcompensate. I do that a lot. That's my personality. I'm all or nothing. I'm 100% in or 100% out. So right off the get-go, I was like, I'm getting rid of everything I own, and that'll make God happy. I'll just sell everything. I sold my motorcycles, my boats, antique trucks I had. I sold everything, thinking that was the right thing to do. Well, I realized that's not really it either. It's not the stuff that's the problem. You guys know that. I didn't. I thought I had to get rid of it all. Like an alcoholic that has to get rid of all the booze in the house. That's the mentality I was taking. And it wasn't until the Lamborghini was the last piece of the puzzle.
And you actually then put it up for sale.
Yes, I did.
And so tell us about that whole process and what happened.
Right. I was walking with my wife around our little lake cul-de-sac, and I said, I think I'm going to put the Lamborghini up for sale. She goes, why? I said, it doesn't have a place in my life anymore, and I think we can actually use the money to somehow make up for all this that I've done. I mean, I have no college fund, I have no 401k, I have nothing.
Okay, let me stop you there. How much at that point did you have invested in the vehicle just in terms of dollars when it was completed? Best guess estimate. How much? 75 to 100. I mean, not that that's, a lot of money, but it's the lifestyle I was living. Like I said, there was other things other than that car. Okay.
There was a lifestyle I was trying to live by liquidating everything.
Sure. So you decide to sell it. You actually put it up for sale on eBay.
I put it for sale on eBay. I just wanted to get rid of it. Like I said to Mark, it was a scar. It was a scar I was wearing that I needed to get rid of. That was my thought. I'll get rid of it, and somehow God has forgiven me, but I never forgave myself, and I know that's wrong. And I wanted to make it up to my family. So I put it on eBay for sale. And Mark Bradley's brother, who's a pastor, came over to my house and said, I'd like to see the car because my son, it was one of my favorite cars, but my son has never seen one. Could we come over?
No, did you get a lot of calls from people who wanted to just, I mean, this is a unique vehicle, unique way it was built.
Yeah, I had people say, I live in Chicago, I'll drive up, I'll come see it. And I always would say no. But Mark's brother, David, sent it on an email from his church, and it said pastor on it. Well, I can't say no to a pastor. I'm a born-again Christian. I can't say no.
I'm going to take a note right here on that. Will not say no to pastor. Very good. Okay, continue. So he comes over, and you allow him and his son, yes, I think, to take a look at the car.
That's all it was. That's all it was. And it turned out to be something totally different.
So what happened when they came over?
I saw the son, and I'm like, here's the car and all, but the son doesn't really seem to be too much interested. And I'm like, okay, well, what else are we going to do? Well, David started talking to me, testimony, how he became a pastor, and I witnessed to him as well, how I was a born-again Christian. Yeah. And 2 hours go by, and he comes up and says, I think you got to talk to my brother. I don't think you're supposed to sell this car. I said, why? He goes, well, I think it could be something used in God's glory and not just given to somebody else to go driving off in the sunset or drive it into a pole or whatever. I think there's a better use for the car, and I will go as far as to say I think there's a reason why it was created in the first place.
And currently the car is on eBay. While this conversation is happening, it's on eBay.
Correct. And I got a buyer already at this point, yes.
And price, what was?
It was $80,000.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't care about the amount.
Sure.
I wanted it gone.
Okay.
And I actually put a phone call to the individual and said, if you would be okay with me, I'm going to end the auction. And I told him my circumstances. We were going to use the car as a ministry. And he goes, well, I'm a born-again Christian. I totally understand what you would like to do with the car. If it ever comes up an opportunity where you want to get rid of it, let me know, and I'll just wait. Oh, okay. So I hooked up with Mark Bradley, and we've been with ideas of how to use this. He spent actually 2 days trying to convince me there was some connection between a ministry and a Lamborghini Countach. It took 2 days to try to connect the dots. I wasn't getting it.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's going to get a mixed message. You're going to see this car. It's going to be a story about human interest. It's going to be about perseverance, how to do something when you don't have anything to work with, monetarily or resources, and how you persevere. Has nothing to do with that.
So much more than that.
It's way more than that.
So you decide to pull it off of the auction, hold on to it, and then as you look forward now, even an event like this, what do you think God's got for you?
I live one day at a time with God. I don't really know. My mantra, if you want to call it that, is if somebody asks me to witness to them, bring the car, talk about the story, if they want me to come, I'm going to. I'm not going to say no to anybody. Mm-hmm. And I think we got something going on tonight, perhaps with a youth group wants to come see the car, and we'll do it again. As long as there's an interest, I will continue to do it.
You mentioned several messages that you really would prefer that guys not walk away from an event like this with, but I know that you've got 3 or 4 things that you absolutely want to make sure that we leave this building understanding and knowing. Let's talk about those. What's the first?
The first one is, and I'll be cliche, don't be that guy. Don't let your possessions, your worldly treasures take precedent over your spiritual life with God. Don't do what I did. I don't have any issues with cars or boats or motorcycles. I mean, I love them too. And the point is, though, the obsessive part of ownership and what's the next thing can slowly creep into your life without you being aware of it. Even people that that are spiritual can have those kinds of things. It's in the day and age that we live in, it's very easy to be distracted with that. God first.
Sure.
That's my number one message.
Number two.
Number two is, even a sinner like me, like I said, I'm 56 years old. I lived outside of God's path for my life. You know, I did everything against what he wanted for me. And it took, you know, my child to end up in the hospital to really waken me up. Don't wait that long. God can forgive anybody. He can forgive a sinner like me. He can forgive you as well. Don't wait.
Sure.
Don't wait. My biggest regret is waiting. The way my heart is filled now and the happiness that I have, I wish I had this all my life. I looked and looked and looked dearly to try to fill that hole in my heart with things. And I thought the next thing, I just need one more, and it'll fill my heart, and I'll finally be happy. It never came.
Didn't work.
It never came. I was more depressed every single time because that didn't work either. That's my second message.
Number three.
This is a public service announcement. I was diagnosed with cancer in September, prostate cancer. I had no idea that prostate cancer was something that a guy in his 40s should be concerned about. PSA, prostate-specific antigen. It's a simple blood test. It can be done with having your cholesterol checked. Have your PSA checked. Earlier is better than later. I didn't have mine checked until I was 56. I got advanced cancer in prostate. I've been through the surgery. I'm going through hormone therapy, probably going to have radiation. I wish I would have done something sooner. That's my public service announcement. Guys, have it checked out. It's a simple blood test.
Is there a number four?
No. That's it.
Well, we've got on your tables, guys, we've got brand new business cards that Ken has had printed up. And they simply say, is there a Lamborghini in your life? And these are there for you to take with you. On the back, it's got a scripture verse. It's Matthew 6:24. His website, bullinthebasement.com, is on there if you'd like more details and I think a whole lot of photographs. And it's the start to finish story, if I remember correct. It's been about a month and a half since I've been on there. But the start to finish story with photographs of building the Lamborghini in his basement. Before I let you go, I got to ask you, how'd you get the thing out of there?
Well, that contractor I told you about came over with a backhoe at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. I chose it on a Monday because I didn't want the big weekend crowds to come looking at the wall being torn down, so I had him do it on a Monday. 9:30, the Lamborghini was in the garage already. He just excavated. We knocked a hole in the wall. We took a concrete saw, sawed it out, hit it with a sledgehammer. I had it supported, obviously, with railroad jacks across the header. And we knocked the wall out, and I had it on a frame I had built, like a trailer without wheels. Had 4 casters in a corner so I could manipulate it up to the wall. And as it started to slide up the dirt, we took the casters off, and it was just like a sled. Came right out.
So you've got the car in your yard at that point. You've got a hole in your wall.
There's a picture on my website of that, and it's also on page 17 of Ripley's Believe It or Not, the insane guy that built the car in his basement.
There you go. So Ken Imhoff, thank you so very much.
Oh,
Appreciate your time here this morning.
It's been a pleasure.